non-compliant clients righting the ship before regulators pounce. And beware FUD, avoiding fear tactics when selling your managed services. That and the latest news and trends in the managed security space coming right up on Cyber for Hire. Building bridges between managed security providers and their clients, it's the podcast where MSSPs, vCISOs, and end users take a united stand against cybercrime. This is Cyber for Hire. Struggling to monitor the growing threat landscape, pressure to reduce costs, security skill gaps, facing compliance issues? These issues can translate to operational, financial, regulatory, and reputational risks to your business. Checkpoint can help. Checkpoint combines an MSSP enablement program, cloud-delivered multi-tenant management, SOC platform, and superior threat intelligence capabilities to give MSSPs the confidence to grow profitably at a reduced risk. Checkpoint is 100% channel-driven. We partner to deliver the best security everywhere. Visit msspalert.com/checkpoint. All right, welcome friends to episode number 27 of Cyber for Hire. How's everybody doing today? I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media in New York, and joining me today, just an hour and a half drive away on I-95, is my guest co-host for the day, Jessica C. Davis, Editorial Director of Channel Brands at Cyber Risk Alliance. That, of course, includes MSSP Alert and Channel E2E. Jessica, we're going to be talking about FUD a little bit later today, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I always like a good metaphor, so I'm going to actually lay one on you here to start the episode. I, just a couple of days ago, ended up going to the dentist. And when I was there, the hygienist that was there decided that she wanted to take all these pictures of my teeth to show me that I was developing certain cracks in some teeth, and oh my goodness, these could wear down and ultimately result in my teeth losing their structural integrity, and maybe they'll fall out. I'm grinding them down, and I'm not exaggerating even all that much in terms of what they were warning me. And they were like, you need, we want to put sealants in 11 of your teeth. And I'm like, well, I was here 6 months ago, and I'm sure these cracks didn't all develop in the last 6 months, so why now all of a sudden do I need sealants in 11 teeth? And they were just sort of like, nah. So I feel like that was almost an example of FUD right there, where they were basically trying to scare me. Now, maybe I'm wrong and my teeth are all going to fall out in the next 6 months. But I'm curious, has anyone ever tried to use FUD on you on any aspect of your life?
Well, sure. And building on your dental metaphor, I can remember when I was much younger than today, and they were telling me, oh, your wisdom teeth, they're malposed, which means they're crooked. They need to come out. It's going to be a problem later in life. But here I am much later in life and still have those wisdom teeth. No problem at all. But they're telling my teenage son now that he needs to get his wisdom teeth out for the same reasons. So, and his case is much different than mine, which was fine. So we'll see what actually happens and what my son decides to do. Plumbers are another one. Also had issues with that as well. Always great to get a second opinion about these things. And I would recommend that to you, Bradley. Go see a different dentist and find out what they say about it.
A good idea. It looks like, though, that you actually showed some wisdom by keeping your wisdom teeth, at least so far. More banter a little bit later in the show. But first, some news just can't wait, which is why we want to share what's top of mind today. So here's your headline, courtesy of SC Media and MSSP Alert. Microsoft, CISA, and the FBI have issued warnings about a cyber espionage group targeting Western European and U.S. government entities, plus any consumer accounts associated with these organizations, with a data exfiltration campaign. Now, Microsoft attributes the activity to the China-linked APT group Storm 0558. The adversaries carried out the attack by leveraging forged authentication tokens in order to access user email via an acquired Microsoft account customer signing key. While governments were the target here, this tactic can obviously be used against companies from any sector. Microsoft said it successfully blocked Storm 0558 from this attack moving forward, meaning its customers don't have to take any further actions themselves unless they've been contacted about being victimized. Still, SC Media's Steve Zurier did cite some sound advice in his article from Joseph Carson, the chief security scientist and advisory CISO at Delinea. Joe, who's a great guy, recommended that organizations periodically check for abnormal credential and identity activity on their networks, rotate credentials periodically, and implement strong privileged access security controls that prevent lateral movement. And so, sound advice for organizations out there and for you MSSPs that are taking care of your clients, something to keep in mind moving forward. And that's going to be our top of mind headline for the day. And now it is time to move on to our InfoSec topic of the week, presenting our big idea: Insecurity, non-compliant clients righting the ship before regulators pounce. Try as they might to keep their clients in compliance with privacy and security regulations, managed services providers are still at the mercy of the organizations they serve. Unfortunately, companies don't always follow the MSSP's or vCISO's advice on items like responsible data stewardship, privacy policies, and breach notification. If an attack does transpire and the company draws the ire of regulators, the security services provider could end up a scapegoat or even embroiled in a liability case. And so this Q&A discussion will look at what resources an MSSP or vCISO service has when their customer fails to make basic compliance a priority. And so leading us through this discussion today is our special guest, Brian Johnson, founder and CEO of Crucible, an InfoSec and vCISO services firm. Brian brings more than 20 years of experience in leadership, founding, and building to his role at Crucible. Previously, he was CSO of Armor Blocks, CISO at Lending Club, and Upwork. Brian has held leadership positions at Uber, Netflix, and Forescout, and he's helped design, build, and secure systems for the U.S. DoD, global finance, and technology companies at scale. Brian has also worked with federal agencies and policy advisors to influence actionable change in national security policy, and he's an active advisor and mentor to several startups and founders in Silicon Valley. Brian, thanks so much for joining us today. Really glad you could be here. And as always, we're going to jump right into things. And I guess really the first thing to examine here is what, as a vCISO or MSSP, what control you actually have over the situation in the first place. If you are doing managed compliance, if that is part of your contracted responsibilities, then clearly there's more responsibility and accountability on your part. If you're doing more generalized incident response or all-around vCISO services, then maybe you're not as much on the hook for these things, but you're certainly giving advice and consultation to the client and hoping that they follow suit. So I guess the first question is really understanding and defining how much responsibility you have as a vCISO in the compliance arena.
Thanks, Bradley. Thanks for having me. I mean, I think it's a good question, right? Obviously your responsibility is driving value to your customer no matter what, really. It's your job to find the way into that, right? So, from a legal and compliance standard from aspects, you also have responsibilities of reporting and aspects through that. As far as your incident response, that's a whole other can of interesting topics to go, because then we have to engage legal. We're talking about, breach notifications and those kind of aspects. But I think, for the first phase of this, we'll focus on the how do we keep your clients aware? How do you keep a client that may not want to go down what exactly you're telling them to do? And how do you keep them seeing the value that you're trying to provide?
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some of the potential consequences for you as a managed security services provider or a vCISO when something really does go wrong on the compliance side. There are state, national, international industry regulations, all of which organizations are expected to follow. You're supposed to be looking out for your client for their sake, but also you need to, look out for yourself as well, because as I had mentioned in the intro, you can also potentially get in hot water as well in certain situations. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You really have to watch out for yourself, to be fair, in the early days, and that's really comes down to contractual obligations that you have when you sign that paperwork. And even if that legal paperwork that you sign in that contract says, where your liabilities starts and ends, the customer expects you to deliver a service that fully covers them. So I think the aspect in this is over communication, and my aspect has always been the most successful part. And whether that's just with the direct manager or CISO or whoever is actually signing your contract, all the way up to the other execs in that business. I think the over communication of them, letting them know that you exist, knowing that you're trying to drive value to them as best as you can, and to really help come up with a more strategic plan. I think in these cases, an ounce of prevention here is really what's going to help you. I think all of us who've been CISOs or in the managed service space doing this for a number of years know that you play like you practice, right? So practicing some of these events, practicing a bad day, is really the thing that will prep you, and not maybe so much you, but maybe the execs, so the other team players on the other side. That also helps the security group that you're usually directly working for, or the governance risk and compliance group you're doing compliance for, help with their business and understanding business objectives. And that's a good thing also. As you talk to other members of the business, you start to learn that business better, and you can probably drive more value. So when something bad does happen and you speak up, somebody actually listens, and you're not in the board reading room for the first time, and everybody's like, "Who's the guy in the corner?" Right? So it's like they already know who you are, and you're already providing that kind of value.
I wonder, Brian, you mentioned talking to clients about different security issues. And I've heard people in the channel talk about or debate really whether they should get clients to sign waivers about particular security risks they're taking, or whether that's bad business to get them to sign waivers. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to get them to sign waivers. I understand the aspect of trying to get that done. I think a lot of what you're responsible for in those initial contracts is really what you're going to rely on, and the over communication, of that. And I would say ensure that communication is just not verbal or over the phone, right? Make sure you're communicating clearly, whether that's in I think providing customers with weekly updates, or delivering a cadence that they can understand, delivering those notes and the aspects in that cadence. If it starts being a legal issue, I think communicating directly with the legal team, both in meetings and electronic communications, email, in my opinion, is usually the best way to do that. So you're starting to communicate the risks at the business, communicating those risks with the right level of people, so that you can take a strategic move. I mean, the real thing here is not to be forced into a tactical situation where you're responding, in a 5-minute, your phone's going off at 3 a.m, kind of incident. The aspect is to slowly back into this over a longer period of time, and to give you some room and some decision-making process. Usually when it comes down to, you have to make a decision in the next 2 hours. The number of realities you have to deal with is you're choosing the worst situation to make the decision, and the most pressure, to where if you make it strategically, over days or months, you have much more time and many more options to take before things go kind of negative, where, let's say a waiver, or your individual legal team as your MSSP or virtual CISO is now sending letters on your behalf to clients. Is something we want to diligently avoid.
Brian, from your experience and observations, what are some of the most frequently occurring compliance lapses that clients can be guilty of, that where a managed services provider may have to step in and provide some guidance and recommendations? Yeah,
so some of the things we see, whether it's from the smallest startup or the biggest tech company in Silicon Valley, is we see them get through the compliance hurdle. They've gotten across the finish line. They get the compliance documentation. There's a big party. Everybody high fives. Yay, we're done with compliance. Not really understanding that literally the next day the compliance starts all over again. So it's really spending time with them, realizing that doing the cadence, collecting your evidence on a usual basis, getting those lovely JIRA tickets in on time. Those kind of things are really an ongoing, solution to do that. Compliance isn't something where you call us at Crucible and, ask us to come in and fix all the potholes and everything else that happens, over the year. Doing those things throughout the year is really the best way to do that. We've had a number of clients who have called us at the last minute to help them get through the compliance, and we've done it. They've thanked us, and then you're usually on a cadence to come back in, whether that's monthly or quarterly or whatever that is, to help them, through that process. So I think that's the number one piece of advice I could give to anybody, either one starting out or in a larger organization, is to do that. It's kind of like exercise or that kind of thing, right? If you do it once, it doesn't really have the benefit of doing it all the time. So I think that's the main thing we really try to teach and showcase to folks as we get in and help them through compliance.
You mentioned the technology industry, Brian, and I saw on the Crucible website that, you specialize in a few vertical industries. Have you found that specializing in these vertical industries that are regulated is a good business practice for your company?
It is for us. And, to be fair, we've done a lot of work in the financial space. Finance has a number of rules by the Treasury Department here in the U.S. and states and all those jurisdictions globally, right? So there's a number of things to do that. It's a much easier conversation to have because most people in finance understand the compliance guidance and legal ramifications of not doing some of these things. And they can be a little more rigorous and tedious at times to get through. Lots of new technology in the finance space, in the fintech space, whether that's crypto, digital wallets, that kind of aspects. And, speaking to federal organizations or state organizations, usually aren't always on the cutting edge of tech and what's coming out. So we really have to help, those financial institutions get through questions for the Treasury Department and really, setting examples of, why we're doing things correctly and, how we're securing, some of these assets. I think that's going to continue to change in the market. But as far as, for verticals, different verticals have different, business goals they're trying to meet. And we found selling into some of those verticals, either one with certain language or certain products has been the most responsive.
I mean, it seems like also from a business perspective, you would get to know that vertical industry and, be more efficient in serving and creating a stack for that industry and serving that industry. So it would be a better business for you as a vCISO provider.
Yeah, both as a vCISO provider and an MSSP, you know the cadence for reporting that has to be done, some of the integral parts that need to be done, some of that review that gets done, let's say example of FDIC reviews. You just get to know what that kind of cadence and what, data, what questions are going to be asked, which is a little bit different than, say, doing a SOC 2 compliance for a SaaS startup or something like that.
Brian, so let's talk about the dreaded scenario that we set up here for this segment, where something that isn't entirely within your control as a vCISO is going wrong from a compliance angle, where you're seeing some dangerous mismanagement of private, PII information being stored in places that might be publicly accessible, or you're seeing signs of a breach that might require some sort of notification and the notification hasn't come. How do you get the client to act responsibly and properly if you're seeing that they're going down the wrong road? What can you say or do in that situation?
Yeah, what we found in these situations to do is really start off with a narrative. Nobody never thought I'd be in the storytelling business, getting into InfoSec. But that's really kind of what you have to do, right? You have to start with a narrative, something you've seen in the past. Luckily, with the number of years I have in security, there's a number of past stories to use as a narrative for, hey, this is what happened, this is what we saw, this was the action, and this was the outcome. And those stories can be good and bad. They could be stories of, this is the issue, this is what we did, and the outcome wasn't great. So that's why we're going to do something else. I found the narrative aspect with historical anecdotes of places we've done business before has really helped. Just coming up with, kind of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt aspects, I know that's going to be talked about later, is really not what will get people to respond to you in the most positive way, right? So you really want to start with that narrative and then get them on a strategic place to, get through that, issue, whether that's a compliance or breach issue, and how to get them kind of, back on the, on the right path, whether that's just, putting something in a report and moving on past it, whether that's a response to an incident. I think that narrative story definitely helps humans kind of understand where they're at and what the best aspect to do. Just going in and telling somebody you're going to do something because I say it doesn't work as a CISO, definitely not going to work as a virtual CISO. And in the managed service space, they may hang up on you. So.
And so I think that's a great idea to, obviously, you want to be able to tell stories. You want to be able to try to control the narrative a little bit. Let's say you're still encountering some level of resistance. So that's sort of you just described what the first step is, and hopefully that's successful. Now, what's plan B when things still really aren't going the way that they should be going? At a certain point, do you have to, in some respect, pose an ultimatum, like I may not be able to continue to work with you, or, in certain cases, I might be legally obligated to have to alert regulators if this continues to go on, whether you want me to or not. Let's talk about, more dire scenarios like that.
Yeah, 100%. So, if the narrative aspect doesn't work and they're still on a path to get themselves into trouble, you start having to, move up the chain, being a little more serious. I don't think the aspect of, I've never had the, you do this or I'll leave kind of really work. I want the customer to be successful. I want that narrative to be there. And usually as I started moving up the chain, whether that's talking to the head of legal, whether that's talking to the CEO, we've even talked to some of our smaller companies, some of the VCs in that space, trying to understand to really get an aspect of doing that. Most of the time when we talk to legal, and we start discussing the legal ramifications of a notification because of an issue in a certain jurisdiction, the response is usually pretty quick. I think lawyers are even less risk adverse than CISOs, so they definitely want to make sure they're on the right path to do that. Compliance can be a little bit, different because you really have to explain with them. Look, it may not be a legal ramification, but you're going to have to explain this gap in your controls for the next, year to 6 months while this, report is live. Is that something you really want to do? And usually if you discuss the impact with them, whether that's the sales impact, whether that's the just overall view in the marketplace, we haven't seen anybody not react to that, luckily. And we've never had to do any type of reporting on a customer who's, let's say, lost PII or that kind of aspect. We definitely leave that to the legal organizations. And we've always seen positive outbacks from that. If you really want to get into a doomsday scenario of doing that, you do have to protect yourself, your business, and your employees at some point, right? So if you do have to cancel, that contract, I say I would over communicate about it. Make sure that everybody is completely understanding. Don't ghost your customers on a Friday just because they're not responding. And then have your internal legal team also involved, so that just to make sure all the paperwork is there and all the communications is accurate.
Brian, also, I did also want to ask you if you had, from your vast experience working with all sorts of organizations, is there an anonymized example you can give us just to kind of illustrate some of the points you're making today about a case where you did work with a client where, maybe you did spot some kind of non-compliance with a particular regulation or framework, and you employed some of the tactics that you just talked about. Maybe not some of those extreme ones that we just recently talked about in the last question, but one where, again, you spotted something and you went to the appropriate stakeholders and told the story that needed to be told to get them to understand why it was important that they correct whatever was amiss. Is there a good example of that you can share?
Yeah, I have a couple of those, and it really, encompasses both compliance and, incident response, right? So we've had customers both where we've gone in for a compliance aspect just to review controls and found an issue that needed to be fixed, and really wasn't in the business goals of the current quarter to get done. As I tease most CTOs, they get paid for delivering new code, not fixing old code. So that's always the back and forth from that. So, and in the IRT, kind of aspect, we've also seen, where they thought they had something controlled. We came in really as doing a compliance audit or, other security work, and found out that, a tentacle of that, incident had gone someplace else. And usually that takes a little bit of going, up into the C staff and reporting that to make sure actions get done and documenting that. And as us as a virtual TISO, my number one goal is to add value back to my customers. So even if we're in there, really with a statement of work just to do compliance, we'll always help with anything that we find from a security incident or something that's going to cause a loss. But in all of those cases, we got thank yous. We did not have a case where they didn't want to respond to it or they didn't want to do anything about it. Maybe the prioritization or when they were going to do about it was more of the friction we had to get through. But we were able to quickly come to a understanding and get that done. And in some cases, we've helped write the code to get that resolved.
All right. Well, great. I think that gives us a much better understanding of what happens in these tricky scenarios where it can get a little bit prickly, with a client where you certainly want to steer them down the right path. They have, they're trying to get business done, but you have to look out for yourself and them at the same time. And certainly that's why some of these conflicts can arise. And now you've given us some really good tips in terms of how to avert a more serious situation by hopefully nipping things in the bud. So appreciate all the advice and recommendations on that, Brian. We're going to, at this point, with the couple of minutes that we have left in this first half of the show, we're going to transition to one of our favorite bits of the show that we do on a recurring basis. It's a spooky little segment that we like to call What Scares You? Now, as we've mentioned on the show before, and actually this will be an integral part of the FUD discussion that Jessica and I will be having later in the second half of the program, the cybersecurity world is full of chicken littles out there who are constantly warning us that the sky is falling, when in reality, some threats are over-exaggerated. Some, not all, because there certainly are times where the danger is very real. And so this bit is an opportunity for us to gather around the virtual campfire here and hear from the experts their scary stories on what keeps them up at night, what gets their spidey senses tingling. And so, Brian, with that, I ask you, what scares you?
Great question, Bradley. So I think the thing that scares me most, you get this from most users, is the things we don't know. But that's what always gets you up or finds yourself in the paper. But I think, from a technical aspect of, one of the things that, kind of keeps me up at night now, I know we're hearing lots about this now, but, the AI and machine learning side of things is moving rapidly. That scares me a little. I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to do all kinds of new and great things. But as a security person, what comes out of that from a privacy, legal, and data loss side of what's being shared where, that keeps you up a little bit at night. We have lots of clients we talk to who are going through the same thing now of like, hey, we're using all this new tech, we're signing up for new things, where is my data going? And sometimes at the current moment, the answers aren't great. So that aspect is, keeping me up, a little bit at night, just thinking what that, next phase is going to be, because this is new ground for everybody. Anybody who says they haven't figured out yet hasn't spent much time in the space trying to work it. So it's going to be new and innovative, I think, are good words to use for, what's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's something that we've talked about a little bit on the show here and there. Initially, especially when ChatGPT first exploded on the scene, some of the initial reactions were from generative AI. Both the positive and negative potentials of how these tools could be utilized both by attackers and defenders to advance their respective agendas. And all of that's true. Then as we thought about it more, we also started realizing some additional implications like the one that you just mentioned, which is when I use these tools, where is the data going? What's happening to that? That's why we're starting to see some of these organizations now, like, Walmart was one of them. Amazon, I believe, was another one, where they've started instituting policies for their employees on how to responsibly use it. Like, don't share company secrets, don't share proprietary code in any of these tools for whatever exercise that you're trying to do, because who knows, where that information is going and who could get their hands on it later.
Yeah, who owns the code? Who generated the code? Whose IP is it? Is Is it yours? Is it somebody else's? Is it the company's? I think those are all interesting. And we're just going through that policy, exercise now. The next piece is going to come for, people like us about how do we implement controls and to make sure that those policies are actually being upheld. I think that's going to be the next, phase of, how we do this. And it's going to be changing. It's going to be changing rapidly. I think anybody in the virtual CISO or managed service space, this is going to be a dynamic time to keep moving and to figure out, what those responses are going to be, because the new ideas are going to come out rapidly. We've already seen that, Bradley, to your point, in the last 6 months to a year. So I think that's going to continue to increase in scale. And the number of companies using this and the new companies showing up to use this is going to be exciting.
On the other side of it too, the creation of ChatGPT, I mean, the technology was trained on all the privacy information that was already out there. And I've seen a couple of headlines in the past week where authors are suing OpenAI over the use, what they say is the ingestion of their work. So it'll be interesting to see how those legal cases are decided as well, and the implications on things going forward.
Yeah, because that's really going to set the case law forward, right? There's really nothing to stand on right now. So none of us who are in the practitioner space know how to react to this. Post that case law, we'll have better guidance on kind of where the boundaries are. But it's going to take a good while for that case law to be built up. It's not something that's going to be overnight. And no offense to my legal friends, legal does not work with the same kind of expedience that we have to in the security side. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see what that is.
Yeah, we're certainly in the Wild West here with generative AI, but that I feel like that's a position that people in the cyber community are used to at this point. We seem to be in the Wild West about something all the time. Things are always just so rapidly evolving in the world of technology and cyber. So this is one of the latest ones, and it'll certainly be interesting to see where things go from here.
And I think it's going to be great. I think the number of things that are going to come out of this are going to be, are going to be really good. But it is our job to be a little bit of the negative side every once in a while, and point out where we need to be a little more secure at.
Absolutely. Agree 100% on that, Brian. With that, we're basically out of time for our first half of the show, but we still do have a whole second half to go of our episode, which will feature our big idea in business, the beware of FUD topic that we've been teasing throughout the first half. So there'll be that and a lot more coming right up. So we will see you in a moment on the other side.